You only ever known. Y'all the main ones I'm watching on my throne. Created everything, but I called you my own. That land I gave you, put my name on it, my home. Yeah, that's my home. Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I made a promise, can't nobody take it. I chose to put you above all the nations. Out of your graves, I chose to awaken. We made a covenant, don't you forsake it. Come get protected while they going crazy. Israel, my firstborn, my baby. Israel, my firstborn, my baby. I woke you up in your land of captivity. I do not change, I want you to remember me. Laws and commandments, I gave you the remedy. Go read the testimonies for your memory. I sent them prophets, but you wasn't hearing me. I come to you if you really come near to me. I heard your cry, now it's time to take it to me. I know what got you from all of your enemies. Who you know open the sea. Them waters was bitter, but I made it sweet. Case you ain't know how to swim, I'm your protector, so I made you walk on your feet. This a reminder you married to me. I just want you to be all I called you to be. They called you niggas, but I made you priests. I'm about to give you back everything. I'm sending plagues for you. I'm sending boys drying up rivers. I leave them dead for you. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. You heard what I said for you. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. You heard what I said for you. For you, you only ever known. Y'all the main ones I'm watching on my throne. Created everything, but I called you my own. That land I gave you, put my name on it, my home. Yeah, that's my home. Israel.
Nowadays, there's not much talk on the Hebrew runaways, so in this video I decided to make a quick tutorial on the subject. The word maroon is a Latin word originally meaning wolf rather than runaway. It was given first to the slaves of West India, mainly in Jamaica, in the Caribbean islands, swamplands, and eventually into the rest of the Americas. Many believe that Spain chose this name Wolf in reference to the Hebrew tribe of Benjamin, who they had taken prior to into the islands of the North Coast, primarily into Jamaica. The Hebrew Bible shows that the tribe of Benjamin was referred to as Wolf, seen in Genesis 49 and 27. But before we go all the way into it, let's take a small but yet important history recap on the self-freed slaves of America. The Negroes were known as a royal race of people. They ruled Europe, Scotland, Ireland, and even North Canaan, which after the 1500s was renamed to Africa, after the Roman general Leo Scipio Africanus. The country was originally called Alkebulan, meaning the Garden of Eden. Now here's something that you might not know. The Caucasian race was in slavery for over 500 years. Here's a small glimpse on how the story happened. The word Moor is a degrading word. It means black or black dark-skinned, mostly referred to the Hebrew race. These Negroes are the ones who joined with the Arabic Muslims to push the Edomites or the red people back from taking over any more territory. Or a better term of understanding, the Caucasoid people from the mountains of southern Russia. It is shown that the Caucasoid people immigrated out of their mountain homes and began to wage war on people who weren't their own, enslaving thousands and even killing hundreds. First starting with the Turkish Hebrews, pushing them further back into Europe. Keep in mind that Turkey is Southeast Europe. The war-bound people were considered as Vikings and very barbaric. Around the 600s, the Royal Negro Company set out to stop the Viking people from expanding any further. Around the 700s, the Negroes stopped the Caucasians, which led to their enslavement of the savages for almost 600 years. However, they did so try to moralize the Caucasians, showing them culture and cooking and bathing, how to shave their beards and even their bodies. These Hebrews ruled for almost 1,000 years, in which there were no large wars at all. Now it is important to keep in mind that the Moors themselves ethnically identified as Hebrews from Israel, Zion, Nazareth, or Jerusalem. Otherwise, they would say that they were from Arabia, Assyria, and overall Muslim. The Moors themselves were Jews.
When the slave trade is mentioned, people normally think of the black African slave trade to the Western Hemisphere during the colonial period from 1500 to the mid-1800s. Yet, 6 decades before the American Civil War, a war was fought by the United States on foreign shores to try and stop the white slave trade. What was the white slave trade? Does it still exist? Who were the Barbary pirates? What was the result of American intervention ending the white slave trade in North Africa? One situation which has gone largely unnoticed in history was Jefferson being the first president to send the military overseas into direct action, the war against the Barbary pirates. For decades prior to Jefferson's accession to office, the Barbary Coast pirates of North Africa had been capturing foreign merchant and warships, stealing their valuable cargoes, and enslaving crew members, while often demanding huge ransoms for their release. Many of these ships and crews were American. Before independence, American merchant ships were protected from the Barbary pirates by the naval.
Keep in mind these are Moors, or Jews who were stopping Caucasians from taking other Jews into slavery.
By the naval and diplomatic influence of Great Britain, which had threatened the use of military force should their ships be molested. However, that American protection came to an end after the colonies won their independence. The Barbary pirates also attacked the coastal northern Mediterranean, launching attacks against France, Italy, and Sicily, kidnapping women as white slaves, primarily and whenever possible, notable wealthy persons and ships for ransom. North African slave markets thrived, as, under Islamic law, known as Sharia, although fellow Muslims could not be enslaved, non-Muslims could be and were. Over a period of more than 300 years, it is estimated that 1 million white Europeans, to include those captured at sea as well as through land raids abroad, were enslaved.
Well, that was really a lie. Over 5 million of them were enslaved in North Africa, Scotland, Ireland, and Europe.
Many of these were Americans captured at sea. In reaction to the attacks, Congress had passed a law authorizing the payment of tribute to the Barbary states, which authorized the construction of 6 frigates, establishing the United States Navy. By the end of the 1700s, when Jefferson was Secretary of State, the United States had concluded treaties with all of the Barbary states.
So after fully subduing the Caucasians, the Jews began to split up again. Somewhere around the mid-900s, they went further into West Africa, settling into what's known as Negro land today.
According to Wikipedia, in the 14th century many Moors and Jews, fleeing persecution in Spain, migrated south to the Timbuktu area, at that time part of the Songhai Empire. Songhai Empire, great trading state of West Africa, centered on the middle reaches of the Niger River in what is now central Mali and eventually extending west to the Atlantic coast and east into Niger and Nigeria.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli are the beginning lines from the United States Marine Corps hymn, and the Tripoli that's mentioned is the largest city in today's Libya. The hymn was written sometime after 1867, and these lines commemorate 2 of the Marine Corps' most famous battles: the Halls of Montezuma, referring to the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 48, and the shores of Tripoli refers to the battles the Marine Corps, along with the U.S. Navy, fought with the infamous Barbary pirates, who terrorized the coast of North Africa, the Mediterranean Sea, and indeed a large part of Europe, for 3 centuries. The name Barbery has nothing to do with barbarians. Barbery is the anglicized version of Berber. the native non-Arab peoples of the region. The Berbers had been famous warriors and raiders by land when they and their allies decided to take to the sea. Many of the Berber tribes were joined by refugees, both Muslim and Jewish, who were either fleeing or being forced out of Spain, as the Spanish, under Ferdinand and Isabella, carried out the Reconquista, the reconquest of much of Spain after 7 centuries of Arab-Muslim rule.
They came up with the term Renaissance period, which means the rebirth. The rebirth of what? The rebirth of the Roman Empire, or Babylon, or the Caucasoid people.
According to Grand Palais, the word Renaissance was used for the first time in the 16th century by Giorgio Vasari, founding father of modern art history, in the famous anthology Lives of the Most Famous Painters, Sculptors and Architects.
The term Dark Ages came from the Caucasians, who were at war with the Arabics and the Negroes who ruled at that time. They were freed out of their captivity through a battle that was led around the 1000s, almost the 1100s, by a guy named William the Great of Normandy. That battle led to them repopulating and pushing further into Africa and selling around into India. So them being ruled over was a dark period for them. It was the battle of the blacks, or the Dark Ages.
The trade of countless nations flowed across, around, and out of the Mediterranean, and the Barbary pirates wanted their piece of it. Spices, gold, gems, and much else from the Middle East were food items, wine, raw materials, and much else from Europe. The ships carrying these goods were one of the prime targets of the pirates, but the most lucrative good wasn't pepper from India or frankincense from Persia, it was human beings. Slavery had existed in the Mediterranean basin since before the time of Rome. During the Roman expansion, people from all corners of the empire were enslaved. Franks, Germans, Slavs, Greeks, various people from the Balkans, Africans traded to Rome by Egypt, Jews from Israel, and more. Some of the richest people in Rome and the Gothic and Arab empires which followed it were slave traders. Many Viking raiders grew rich and powerful from the treasure they hoarded trading slaves. In the 1500s, the Ottoman Turks expanded along the North African coast. Due to distance and the fiercely independent nature of the Berbers and others, however, Ottoman control of the Barbary coast was nominal. As long as the people there recognized the Ottoman Sultan as their overlord and gave help when it was asked, the Turks left the people of the coast alone. One of the many interesting things about the Barbary pirate is that, as time went on, many of them were not from the region. Many were Europeans, acting much like today's mercenaries, looking for adventure and a quick buck. Unfortunately, what they were mainly looking for were other human beings to sell into slavery.
Well, one thing that we're going to find out is, where did the real Berber Jews go to? Where did the Jews of Ireland go to? Where did the Jews of Scotland go to? Where did the Jews of North Africa go to? Where did the Jews of Europe go to? Where did the Jews of West Africa go to, of Negro land? And they went into slavery, into the transatlantic slave trade.
At first, the Barbary pirates confined themselves to the Mediterranean basin. This was done out of necessity, because for more than a century, the ships that the Barbary pirates traveled in were galleys. You might be familiar with the galley. In virtually all movies about ancient Greece and Rome, the ships you see are galleys, powered by slaves rowing their lives away. Though some of these movies and some Roman galleys did have sails, these were basic square sails. They weren't the main source of the ship's propulsion. They just added speed when the wind was right, for the ancients lacked the technology and the knowledge to tack into the wind. So likely millions of human beings around the world toiled away at the oars. By the mid-1500s, many areas of the western Mediterranean coastline of Europe were abandoned. The raids of the Barbary corsairs, another term for pirate, especially those of the Barbary coast, had been so successful in raiding that those left fled inland for greater protection. The English lost 466 ships to the pirates. That is a huge number. It not only shows the size of the English merchant fleet, but the size and activity of the Barbary pirates. And when you stop to consider that English ships were not the only ones seized, you have a group of very skilled, very rich pirates. Before we tell you more about who many of the slaves were who were taken by the corsairs, let's stop for a moment and explain what happened to them.
Popular culture has a tendency to romanticize pirates and their legends, mostly highlighting Europeans who took their own destiny into their hands, challenging governments and principalities, and they took this route largely due to lack of opportunity or grim upbringings. However, the dire circumstances of the Atlantic slave trade and the systematic dismantling of African kingdoms no doubt presented many black men the opportunity for advancement and independence through pirating. And today, we're fortunate to learn about these men in the legends of the Black Caesar, a collection of stories about black pirates who actually existed. Either way, the legend of the first Black Caesar can be said to be an allegory of all black pirates who acquired power and sovereignty in the 17th and 18th century. It's estimated that nearly 50% of Caribbean pirates were black during this time frame. During the golden age of piracy, about 1680 through 1725, Africans were often forced to work as slaves on land. Slavers, finding it hard to financially deal with Black Caesar, tricked him into a slave ship where they imprisoned him and shipped him to the New World. En route, a severe hurricane struck the slave ship. Caesar and others escaped from the sinking ship and attached themselves to remnants of the ship, floating to what is now Adams Key on the southern tip of Elliott Key in Florida.
The worst fate for men was to be a galley slave. The life of a galley slave was most often quite short and extremely miserable. Men were placed at the oars, chained to the deck and to the oars, and never allowed to leave. Never. That meant that in addition to rowing everywhere, and often being beaten or whipped by the crew while doing so, the enslaved rower would take his meals at the oars, and meals likely consisted of fish remains and rotting vegetables. Galley slaves remained at the oars in all weather. They did not have cushions to sit on. The epic movie Ben-Hur illustrates well the life of a galley slave.
When someone says that they're Jewish, that ISH is a suffix, it means pertaining to. They're not actual Jews. They're converts, They are converts. They aren't the real bloodline royal Jews, because those Jews were sent into captivity.
According to Wikipedia, conversion to Judaism, Hebrew, Romanized, Ger or Hebrew, Romanized, Gerrit, is the process by which non-Jews adopt the Jewish religion and become members of the Jewish ethno-religious community. Here's the definition of Jewish. relating to, associated with, or denoting Jewish people or Judaism.
Worst of all, galley slaves were never unchained to relieve themselves. They did so at the oars. Their benches and bodies became coated with waste until a hard rain, or the crew finally doused them with water because of the stench. As you can likely imagine, the constant friction of their skin on the oars, their feet on the deck, their buttocks and thighs on the benches meant that the slaves often had open cuts and/or raw skin. In turn, this meant widespread infection, fever, disease, and death. It also meant gangrene and maggots eating away at you while you were rowing and being whipped. Not only was the life of an enslaved rower miserable, it was also, at times, filled with terror. Though by the 1500s galleys had started to carry smaller, primitive cannons, their existence depended on getting within grappling distance of their foes and pulling their ship towards the enemy. All the while, the slaves sat and waited while combat took place around them, and if that was not enough, if the ship went down, so did the slaves, chained to their benches. There are a number of unusual things about the Barbary pirates. They were not just Berbers. In their later history, many were not. No, in addition to the Berber captains were Arabs, Turks, Dutch, Greeks, and even a number of cases like that of Jack Ward, an English Barbary pirate in the early 1600s. One famous pirate was an Arab Muslim woman named Sayyida al-Hur, who became governor of a district of Morocco and was later the wife of its sultan. At a time when Muslim religious tolerance exceeded that of Europe, even a small number of Jewish men became pirates. One such being Sinan Reis, who rescued the son of the most famous Barbary captain, Hayreddin Barbarossa, known in the Mediterranean from the English translation Redbeard. In 2004, Ohio State University history professor Robert C. Davis published Christian Slaves, Muslim Master, which drew notice for its story of how European slaves made their way into the slave pens of the Barbary coast and the Ottoman Empire. Davis's method of calculating the number of white slaves taken is mathematically sound, though many have said that his formula only takes an average number for every year for more than 2 centuries. By Davis's calculations, at least 1.5 million European slaves were taken from the coastal villages and ships in the Mediterranean basin, and as far afield as Ireland, as you heard in the case of Baltimore. Men were sent to hard labor in the mines, galleys, or the fields. Women were sorted by attractiveness and health. Those deemed unattractive were made to do work in the kitchen, fields, and homes. Attractive women and girls were sent to various important figures for their harem, including for the Sultan of Sultans in Istanbul. Children were often taken and raised as Muslims, some of those making their way into the famous Janissaries, an Ottoman version of the Roman Praetorian Guard. From the middle 1600s on, various European nations waged war on the Barbary pirates. This was done not only to stop the taking of European slaves, and, note, the European slavery of Africans continued, but to stop the pirates' seizure of important and valuable commodities such as olive oil and cotton from Egypt. One nation who took particular offense to the Barbary pirates' raids was the United States. The United States fought 2 wars, the First and Second Barbary Wars, to stop the seizure of trade goods bound for the new nation, and to stop the seizure of American sailors to sell in the slave market.
It was an understood fact that the northern tribe had left almost 1,000 years ago to live in the Americas. Tribes like the Aztecs and even the Mayans.
According to ResearchGate, therefore, Mexi or Messi is the Messiah, and Mexico, the city of the Messiah, the city of Jesus Christ.
Mexico is known to be based off the Hebrew term Messiah, They even spoke a broken form of Hebrew, showing they did more than just meet Hebrews. They actually either were Hebrews or had a long term of living or encounters with them. One of the largest pyramids is found in Mexico, built by the Mayans and Aztecs. After fighting the Negroes and Arabic pirates at sea, the Caucasians took hold of their landmarks as long as possible. Spain, for example, took control over Jamaica, waging war on its inhabitants, the Taínos, in 1510. This was done through Pope Nicholas V, who wrote a papal bull, which is a decree of law, and in this case, being a military warrant, stating that all Moors, Arabics, and inhabitants of West Africa who did not submit to Roman Catholicism are to go into perpetual slavery. This bull or law was approved and made official through the King and Queen of England, Spain, and Italy. Basically all Caucasoid nations. This law was to take all Jews out of the Western world completely and into the newly conquered land on the other side of the waters to the north. It was there in Jamaica where the new term maroon was introduced, given to the Moors, which meant black, or Negroes, which also meant blacks. The term maroon was given to the Negroes who rebelled inside of those lands. It is also to note that the Taínos spoke some type of form of Hebrew. When Spain invaded the lands, those who were left from the war were made slaves on the land or shipped out of the land into the islands or into the Americas. The Spaniards said upon bringing the Hebrew slaves to Jamaica, they were easily able to communicate with the indigenous slaves that were already there, meaning they, as much as the Mayans or the Aztecs, spoke some type of Hebrew. As said earlier, the word maroon is a Latin word that was originally given to the Negroes that resisted slavery there in Jamaica. See, these Hebrew Moors were very familiar with war from the battles in Europe and showed the other enslaved captives how to fight back. Those who revolted were referred to as the Maroons, runaway slaves. Hey Shalom, if you don't know, my name is Nazir Ben Judah. I am a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Judah here in the Americas. If you liked part 1 of this video, make sure you like and subscribe so that way it rotates. Part 2 is on the way. I'll be talking about the Maroons and Hebrew Israelites in America. In Brazil, Caribbean islands, Haiti, Jamaica, North America, South America, even up to some parts of Alaska. I'll definitely be speaking on that in part 2 of the Hebrew Maroons. I really hope y'all enjoy and the Most High be with y'all. Y'all stay prayed up, y'all stay girded in this truth, all right? Hallelujah, hallelujah. Barak Yahweh Bahashim Yamashiach Yahweh Shah. Amen.
Serve sandwiches for dinner, I wouldn't wish it on my kids. You ain't never seen the struggle until your soul touching your ribs. You ain't never seen a Glock until you in the shit for real. Boober, you know I love you, I appreciate everything you did. Black Jew, you is my brother, and to meet you was a gift. Nancy K, you are the truth, and you still walking with me still. Y'all had more to get a world, and it'd be hard to let it go. Y'all had more to get a world.